Hello everyone, and thanks for taking the time to attend today's Entuity customer session introducing Entuity 16.5. We think you will find 16.5 incorporates many new features that will help make your network management much more effective, as well as add a new way to troubleshoot your application paths for better performance, making Entuity 16.5 much more than a network management solution. I am Pat O'Hara, Marketing Manager here at Entuity, and with me today is John Diamond, our Product Manager. JD will be running through the major features found in 16.5 and how they will advance your network management capabilities. Then we will review what resources are available, answer any questions you may have, and finally check out the Entuity calendar for the remainder of the year. Before we get started, a few housekeeping details. The call is on mute mode to eliminate outside noise. Please use the chat panel for any questions you may have, and there is time allotted at the end to answer them. Additionally, the session will be recorded and posted on the Entuity YouTube Center for your future reference. The link will be forwarded to you once it is available. With all that said, I'd like to turn it over to JD, and he will take you through the Entuity 16.5. JD?
Oh, thank you very much, Pat. And once again, Entuity is very pleased to present a raft of new capability in the new version of the Entuity Network Management product. And I'm going to kick off today by explaining why we now have really gone beyond network management with a new introduction. Over the last few years, Entuity has been developing a technology that we've called SurePath. Up until now, SurePath has been available as a separate product, and its role in life is to discover and monitor how the network is actually carrying traffic between hosts that need to intercommunicate to deliver a business service. And so this is the melding together of a comprehensive management platform. In that management platform, both the application path monitoring provided by SurePath and the network infrastructure monitoring provided by the rest of the Entuity product, and it is now all in one product. The application path monitoring provided by SurePath is intended to not only identify how the traffic is moving through the network by performing path tracing at both layer 2 and layer 3. It's not just a straightforward layer 3 traceroute style product. This understands how the traffic is moving through both the switched network at layer 2 and the routed network, and to monitor changes in that path as time goes on. Modern networks are highly redundant, and the path that traffic takes through the network as often as not isn't the path that was necessarily intended by the original architects, given changes that have happened to the network, both physically with new equipment, new connections, etc., but also configuration changes that may have taken place that may have had unforeseen side effects. This is now all in one product, so that to take advantage of this path tracing, you no longer need to install multiple products. Let's take a look at a little bit more about the justification for the whole SurePath initiative from Entuity. When you've got applications being monitored, typically via some form of application performance monitoring product, as often as not, those products focus on the behavior of the application instances themselves. These applications are often distributed. Parts of them are on different servers. There are aspects of database monitoring. There's storage servers, middleware, and various other parts of the system, often front-ended by some form of web server. But those different components need to intercommunicate, and that's where the network becomes pivotal in the operation, that needs to hold the whole infrastructure of servers together in order to provide that overall business function. However, the application performance management products typically don't look in detail at how the network is actually delivering that connectivity. They treat the network somewhat as what I would tend to refer to as a big fluffy cloud of connectivity that is expected to do its job. And if the fingers of blame are being pointed at the network, you just call in the network team and let them try and figure it out. We believe that there is a need here to bring together the disciplines of application performance management and network management. They are very different in terms of what they do, and quite often it's different teams within an organization that are using the tools. However, there is a need when analyzing and monitoring the behavior and performance of applications to bring in a network dimension. And the most fundamental aspect that is needed is a knowledge of how the traffic is actually passing through the network, which parts of the network are being used, which devices, and which ports and which links to interconnect hosts that need to communicate with each other, and critically, monitoring changes in those paths over time. If a path deviates from the path that you would ideally like that traffic to be moving down, it is well worth someone knowing in a timely manner that that deviation has happened, because that could well have performance implications and even security implications if that path is now traveling outside of a secured environment. I'm going to give you a couple of use cases that we've run up against while we've been developing and deploying SurePath. The first one came from an enterprise down in South Africa that was monitoring and trying to sort out a very badly performing SAP deployment. This was deployed across multiple servers and was not delivering anywhere near the interactive performance that one would expect from such an implementation. They were evaluating both Entuity and SurePath at the same time, and found that when they started tracing the traffic between two key SAP servers, what should have been a 3-hop connection between these two servers ended up being 15 or more hops in an erratic, ever-changing path. Now, this obviously raised immediate concerns, not least because when they looked in more depth, the path was actually going in and out of a secure area that it should never have been in the first place. And what had been uncovered was an attempt to get connections working, which involved bypassing firewalls, completely invalidating the security of the environment. Now, this obviously is a very bad situation to be in, but it was doubly worse because the connections were poor between key aspects of the application. One of the big problems in the industry is that when you have a network problem, it doesn't always stop the traffic flowing. If it did, it would be blatantly obvious and people would fix it. The problem is when traffic still flows, but in a degraded manner. And in this case, it was heavily degraded. It was flowing in and out of the secure area in a bizarre path. And as soon as that was detected and identified, steps were able to be rapidly taken to remove these straps around the firewalls, to change the configuration and make sure that that traffic was now going where it should have gone and that the secure area was resecured. We had another recent situation with a US customer who has deployed SurePath and is using it already for various different monitoring to address a variety of issues within their network. This particular one was an interesting one. They are obligated to perform testing of their disaster recovery mechanisms for a variety of network failures. And this testing involves not just proving that traffic still flows when parts of the network are taken down, but that they can document the path of the traffic before the test is carried out, while the failure situation is present, but critically, once the failure has been removed, they need to prove that the network path has reverted to its original path, not just that the network traffic still moves and connects between the endpoints, but that the path has reverted to the original. And this is where SurePath was able to help them by monitoring the changes in the path, and it documents and maintains history of path changes so that you can go back in history and see which path was being taken between which devices and which ports, between individual nodes, pairs of nodes that are being monitored over a course of time. This cut down the effort needed to perform these tests immensely. I'm going to give you a demonstration of SurePath in just a few minutes. But before that, I've got a few more things I want to talk about. Another big change really is going to help the managed service provider community, of which we have several customers offering services to their clients using Entuity as the network management system. One of the things they tend to run into, and this can be something that a larger enterprise themselves would run into, particularly if they were to merge or take over another organization, is that parts of the monitored network share the same IP address ranges. And quite often for a managed service provider, their customers will use the same IP address ranges as each other. Now, this means that the standard approach to addressing this, which is to allocate a dedicated Entuity server to each of these customers, although that works and it works well, there is an implication, particularly if the networks involved are fairly small with small numbers of devices, that the overhead of allocating a separate server, even if it's a virtual machine, for each customer start to impact the bottom line. So what we are now offering as part of the standard deployment is an option to handle overlapping address spaces. This is expanding our multi-tenancy capability, and it means that we can now, from a single Entuity server, monitor devices on multiple networks, even if those different networks share the same IP addresses. This cuts down the number of management servers, possibly even down to just one, and it reduces the overhead. The key aspect that we're doing here is introducing a concept of zones. Now, every network management company uses the word zone to mean something different. What Entuity is using it to mean is a network that needs to be managed separately from another network because of overlapping IPs. The administrator of the Entuity system can set up multiple zones, and each zone is associated with a network interface on the Entuity server via its IP address that will funnel the traffic to and from that particular network. The operating system itself is not used to route the traffic. It can't do that because it won't know which IP in an ambiguous situation it needs to route the traffic to. So we are doing the routing. Every IP address that we have under management is associated with a specific zone, and that's how we avoid ambiguity where you've got the same IPs being used in different networks. Each of these zones can also be associated with a dedicated DNS server. Naturally, if the networks being managed are sharing the same IP address ranges, they can't be sharing the same DNS server. So you can allocate a different DNS server to each zone. And by the way, you don't have to use DNS. You can opt to use a static file of IP to host names, like a host file, and use a different one for each zone. You have a choice between DNS and host files. That keeps the traffic apart, allows us to do the routing, and it reduces the number of servers needed in the deployment. We've got another aspect that is going to be of value to various organizations who are deploying virtualization technology. This is specifically related to our VMware support. We've actually had support for various different virtualization technologies in the product for several releases, including VMware. We can discover and monitor in this case with VMware, the hypervisors, the EXI hypervisors, ESXi hypervisors, either directly via their API, we don't use SNMP for this, or via a vCenter server that already has them under management. The benefit of that is that if you've got a bunch of ESXi hypervisors under management via a vCenter server, you only need one connection to the vCenter server in order to manage all of those hypervisors. Now, up till now, we've been able to show you all of the hypervisors that are known to the vCenter server. For each hypervisor, we've shown you a list of all of the virtual machines with various information about them, including their host operating system and how much memory is allocated to each one. And we've also been able to show you the virtual switches, both the standard and the distributed virtual switches, and various information about the port groups and other information there. But we've not been showing you any dynamic information. Now in 16.5, we've extended the support so that we are monitoring which virtual machines are actually enabled, which ones are suspended, which ones are using how much memory. So we're monitoring memory utilization on a regular basis, and we're monitoring CPU utilization for each virtual machine on a regular basis. We're also going down to the virtual interfaces in these hypervisors and monitoring those for packet and byte rates in both data directions, even though they are a pure virtual concept. And we're showing you all of that information in the web UI of Entuity, just as though it were a physical concept, but it's, you and I both know that it's a virtual system being monitored. Something else on that one that is worth pointing out, when the VMs move under the control of vMotion, then we will also give you an event in real time to warn you of that move, because that can have network consequences, and it's well worth understanding that a move has happened. Now for an aspect of the user interface that up till now we've had a Java dependency. Part of the user interface up till now has been implemented using Java. It was the component viewer and various other tools that were called from the web user interface. In 16.5, we have completely eliminated all user interface Java dependencies. This means that the user interface is 100% web implemented. All of the remaining functionality that previously was only accessible within the component viewer has been re-implemented and extended within the web UI. This will make deployment and maintenance much easier. Some organizations, for security reasons, couldn't even allow their users to run the the Java UI, and so this means that they will be now having access to a range of functionality that previously they were blocked from using. And for example, within the configuration management and configuration monitoring capability of Entuity, which relies upon command line communication to the managed devices. The credentials of these devices used to only be able to be managed through the component viewer. Those are now managed along with all of the SNMP credentials via the inventory page. The editable attributes, such as the location and the contact name of devices, the line speed and description of ports, those can be overridden within Entuity if you don't like what's come back from the device when it was discovered. But that can now be handled through the web, through the Advanced tab of the Explorer. I'll show you that in just a moment. And there's other bits and pieces, including the ticker, which is a live high-speed poller with display. That is all now in the web, and there's some enhancements to do with the way we present IPSLA and annotation information. So with that said, I think it's time for me to actually show you the real thing rather than just talking about it. Okay, now we have a map of part of my test network, and I'm going to be just giving you a quick demonstration of a small amount of what SurePath can achieve. Within this test network, I've got a couple of servers, and we've got some traffic that I'm going to be moving from the Chicago server over into the San Fran server. This is actually an FTP transfer, and we've got a redundant routed network in the middle with these three routers, OSPF configured so that it can tolerate a single link outage and still maintain connectivity between the routers. Now, if you just look at the diagram there and take a hint from the names of the routers, if I were to say, how is my traffic going to go from Chicago server to the San Fran server, it's fairly obvious that it's probably going to want to go directly from the Chicago router to the San Fran router. It doesn't make any sense going through the extra hop in Boston to get to San Fran. But to confirm that, I'm going to use SurePath. What I've got is a path already set up to check out the Chicago to San Fran path, and what it's discovered is the set of hops between the servers at both ends and all of the intervening network infrastructure, including two different layer 2 switches in Chicago, connecting onto the Chicago router, hopping through, fortunately here, going direct from Chicago to San Fran, and then out to the San Fran LAN to the San Fran server. If I were to just select one of these links, then what you'll see is that it identifies exactly which devices are interconnected through which ports. Not only that, but it tells me how much spare capacity there is in that link. It knows how much traffic is flowing and what the maximum line speed is for that connection. And so it's able to work out what the headroom is, how much spare capacity. This icon in the middle is a bottleneck indicator. That is the link that has the least spare capacity. In this case, it's a fairly low-speed link, and it's only got just over 3 megs of spare capacity on it. That's a WAN link. Now, normally, if you've got a mix of LAN and WAN in your path, you would expect the WAN link to be the weakest link. In fact, we had a customer recently tell us that they had been monitoring a problem that had been under evaluation to do with a database synchronization, which was scheduled to take place overnight, and it had a time window in which it could work, and it was exceeding the time window. They had invested in various upgrades to the network, including the WAN. They'd put gig ports in various different parts of the network, upgraded the switches and routers, and they were still having problems. They used SurePath to check out the path between these servers and found that the weakest link, the bottleneck icon there, was not on the WAN. It was actually on an access port, a switch access port, and that had been skipped when it came to the upgrade and was still a 100 meg access port. That was the weakest link. That was holding up the database transfer and stopping it completing in time. After an emergency upgrade, they found that the transaction was now well within the time frame allowed. And so that was a quick identification. Even though it was on the layer 2 portion of the network, SurePath was able to trace through it and identify that that was taking part in this transfer. So I'm actually going to just pull out a connection now, which is my simulated WAN connection between Chicago and San Fran. And that means that in a moment when the routes have converged, I'm going to force a rediscovery. This will happen automatically on a periodic basis. You can schedule how frequently it happens. And it's doing a rediscovery, and in just a few seconds it's going to present what the new path is. And what you'll see is here we are now hopping through Boston. Because we've lost the connection, the direct connection from Chicago to San Fran, we are now going via Boston. Now if I were to go back to that map I showed you earlier, here's the map of my network. You'll see the outage. That's the outage between Chicago and San Fran. But if I wanted to see how that path existed in the context of that map, I can easily do that. There's a highlight option here. I can say I want to highlight a network path. This is the path. And here it shows that it is actually traveling via Boston down to get to San Fran. And that will stay up to date as paths change, and those changes are detected by the periodic rediscovery. One thing I didn't emphasize, and it is absolutely critical to the idea behind SurePath, is that we can monitor multiple paths simultaneously. So you can enter multiple pairs of IP addresses between which you want to identify the paths and keep an eye on whether or not there are any deviations. And talking about deviations, if I were to go and take a look at the events associated with that view, you will see not only have we got some network outages where I pulled that connection out, but critically you've got this additional incident showing me the network path changed from reference. That traffic is no longer flowing down the path that I want it to, and so it's warned me about that, and that is the heads up that is necessary to be on top of these changes. These incidents, because they are all within Entuity, can all be forwarded to third-party handlers such as TrueSite Operations Management or Quest Foglight. So we have those integrations, and they can take the incidents just like they can take any other incident from Entuity. It's totally and utterly part of the system. Okay, let's switch gears. I'm going to take a look at what I was telling you about with VMware. Here's a vCenter server, and it is aware of a couple of hypervisors. It's also got some virtual switches that it's aware of. And if I were to dig into one of those hypervisors, you'll see a bunch of virtual machines. You'll also see some virtual network interfaces. If I were to look at this virtual machine, you'll see that we are now monitoring the host memory utilization, the guest memory utilization, and the CPU utilization. Now obviously that's up and running, but that can be confirmed using the power status attribute, and that is shown as powered on. If I were to go back and take a look at another virtual machine, this one's not very busy at all, and in fact when I take a look at the power state, you'll see it's suspended, which is why it's not showing anything. So all of that additional information is available, and it's presented through the user interface, which means it can be incorporated in reporting and dashboards as well. If I take a look at this virtual network interface, you'll see we've got traffic, both at the bit and packet rate, being shown, monitored in both data directions. I didn't mention configuration management earlier, and I really ought to, because we've done a fair bit of work in configuration management, particularly the configuration monitoring that we have in the product, which allows you to upload configuration files and identify changes and deviations from the policy requirements. That has been re-implemented using the same back-end technology that we developed for configuration management that was rolled out in the 16.0 release. And that means it's now a lot easier to customize it. You can customize it through the web UI if you're suitably authorized. And so you can adjust it for requirements for different types of devices yourself. We'll always be around to help, but we've given you a lot more flexibility to do that yourself. We've also extended the permissioning flexibility, so individual configuration management tasks. A task could be something like shutting a port down or adding a new community string to a device. Those individual tasks can now be permissioned separately. So different groups of users can be selectively permissioned to have access or be denied access to individual tasks. And those tasks are now able to be called upon from the event management system. So with an event management system action, which would be used typically for doing things like sending out an email or performing some other operations, those actions, which are the result of event processing through a set of rules, they can be used to fire off a configuration management task. Now, one example of that that I've implemented for test purposes is detecting a continuously flapping port that is flapping for more than a certain amount of time. For example, setting up a rule to identify a port that is continuously flapping up and down for an hour, and then as a result of that, firing off a configuration management task automatically to shut that port down. And naturally, all of that operation would be logged in the audit trails, so you can see what happened and when and why. But it means that if you've got a requirement to shut down flapping ports, you can implement it, but that's only the beginning. There's many more ideas that can be brought to bear using that mechanism. Let's take a look at some other bits and pieces. I mentioned that we've got Ticker now implemented in the web. Now, Ticker is a way of on-demand polling either ports or device attributes. And here, if I were to select a port, I can call upon Ticker from a context menu, and I can select, for example, the inbound utilization attribute, maybe the outbound utilization attribute, and I can start drawing a Ticker chart. And instead of coming up in a Java UI, this now comes up within the web. It's going to default to 5-second polling, and after it's gathered a couple of samples, it's going to start plotting them. Now, this is, at the moment, still using a mode of charting called scatter plotting. I'm going to turn it back to line charting. And you can see here that we're drawing a line. This is actually set on a 1 second. I was using that a little earlier, so it still preserved the 1 second polling. I can drop it down to 5 seconds if I want to. I've got a complete selectivity over the poll rate. And there's a whole raft of other configuration settings I can put it in. Let's go back to the 1 second polling, and let's maybe do area charting. So it'll draw a stacked area chart of the data. Now, the critical thing is this is all in the web, which means it was defined by a URL. And that URL is accessible up here. If I were to drag that into the dashboard editor, I can put that Ticker chart into a dashboard. I don't have to stop at one. I can have multiple Ticker charts in a dashboard if I want. I just happen to have prepared one earlier. If I go down to my custom dashboards, this dashboard has got 4 charts. These are 4 tickers. They're set for 1 second polling. It doesn't store the data in the database, which is why the chart, when it comes up, is empty. But as soon as it comes up, it will start polling the way it was defined to poll and present it using whatever graphical presentation settings were previously defined. So you've got a whole new dimension of live monitoring that you can be presenting if and where that is appropriate. I mentioned that we've got some changes in the area of IPSLA support. And this is predominantly around the way that we present the information. If I take that router, and if you look at the Explorer, you'll see we have various new tabs, including IPSLA. If I select it, it'll show you immediately all of the IPSLA operations that are being monitored on that router. If I were to drill down on one of them, let's take that connection here to the BBC, then you'll see that in the Summary tab, we are getting some top-level information. We didn't have that before. You used to have to go to the Advanced tab to get anything. We're now presenting a subset of the most important metrics as gauges and charts. We've still got all of the information available in the Advanced tab, so you can chart that and put it into reports and do various other things with it. But we've made it easier to visualize and navigate through that information. You noticed probably that I had among the other tabs here a MIB browser. That was associated with the ticker. So it does allow you to load whatever MIBs you want and then select OIDs from them, even display tables and pick OIDs from tables and have that displayed within the ticker. So you can build your own attributes to be ticked from within this UI. I'm going to show you a couple of other things. I mentioned that we've got configurable attributes. So if I were to go and take a look at the Advanced tab, you'll notice here that some of these attributes are underlined. That means they are editable. One of them is pink, and that means that it has already been edited. If I were just to click on it, you'll be able to see that I could go in here and just maybe put my initials on the end of it, wipe the end out there and put my initials. We'll change it, and that will then be redisplayed. So that's the value that would be presented if anybody used that within the user interface or within a report. That would also be useful at the port level. All of these could be done before, but they had to be done through the component viewer. If I were to go in and take a port and take a look at the Advanced tab, you'll see that the line speed is at a 4 meg port, 4 meg in and out, and they could be overridden as well. If that was not actually the truth, you could correct it by overriding that value within Entuity. And finally, I just wanted to make it clear. At the Summary tab, down at the bottom, you'll see the annotation. I've already annotated this, put a couple of lines of text in. It can take arbitrary text, and that means that whereas this used to be able to only be performed using the component viewer, now through the web, if you're suitably authorized, you can add textual annotations to any component, and that would be ports, devices, whatever the component. You can add annotations that can then be seen by others. It's a good way of making notes that are shared among a team. And something that isn't necessarily obvious, these annotations can now be leveraged within the report builder. If you build custom reports, you can take advantage of that and incorporate these annotations into the reports. So that said, there are a whole raft of other enhancements. I haven't got time to talk to you about them today, but if you would like to go deeper into any aspect of this, do please reach out to your Entuity sales team, your sales managers or your sales engineers, and they'll be more than willing to take you through into whatever depth you want about all of the exciting new changes that we've been implementing recently. And with that, I'm going to pass the control back to Pat, who will tell you a little bit more about some more resources that we have available to you.
Thanks, JD. So we're going to look at what supporting materials we have available. And there are a variety of documents to aid you in understanding of the new enhancements. The documents are available on the Entuity Customer Dropbox folder, which we will send you the link with the recorded session details as well. As you know, product documentation is found on the Entuity Training Academy portal. Should you need login credentials, there is a registration form on the portal homepage itself found on the top banner of our corporate website, entuity.com. So let's look at some next steps in learning how 16.5 can help IT organization. When they become available, the new features videos will provide more information about the new product enhancements. Please take a few minutes to watch them. Again, as JD mentioned, if you would like a personal demonstration of the SurePath module or Entuity 16.5, contact your Entuity systems engineer or email us at info@entuity.com. Should you have immediate interest in SurePath, contact your Entuity sales director or systems engineer for more details. And now it's time to open it up for questions. So if you have any further questions, please jot them on the chat panel. And in the meantime, we have received one, JD, and the question is, we are currently an MSP that is already using multiple servers to handle overlapping address spaces among our clients. Can we consolidate that configuration into fewer servers and still retain the existing client device history?
Oh, that's a good one, Pat. In fact, I should have mentioned this earlier. It is a relevant use case. It's all well and good rolling out a new implementation of Entuity with multiple overlapping IP address spaces being handled out of the same server. But if you've already got multiple servers dedicated to individual customers and you wanted to bring them together into one or a few Entuity servers, you probably don't want to lose the history that you've already been gathering. And the good news is our development team is just putting the finishing touches to a command line utility, which will be available through our support team. You'll just need to raise a support ticket and request it. And that utility will allow a subset or all of the historic data and configuration information to be taken from one Entuity server and then merged into another one. So you'll be able to take the information relating to the history for a bunch of devices or all of the devices off one, and then build yourself a central server with that list of devices in there so that they can then be managed from a central server rather than having to be managed from individual remote servers. Yep, just reach out and raise a trouble ticket, and we'll get you that utility when it becomes available.
And it looks like that's it for today on the questions, JD. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Finally, we would just wanted to let you know that 2 more Tech Talks scheduled to round out the year. On November 30th, RESTful API will be the topic, and on December 14th, we will feature multi-tenancy. And last but not least, Entuity 17 will be available mid-year 2017. So, on behalf of JD and myself, we'd like to thank you all for attending this Entuity 16.5 presentation. We hope 16.5 will provide you with enhanced management capabilities. And again, if you have any questions, please contact your Entuity sales director, Entuity systems engineer, or email us at info@entuity.com. Have a great week.